Today marks 10 years since the deadly Paris terror attacks. More than 130 people were killed and 400 injured in an Islamic State suicide bombing at the National Stadium and shootings at nearby bars and cafes. Now Paris is remembering the lives lost. Foreign correspondent Tom Soufi Burridge is in Paris with the latest. Hi, Tom. These commemorations started this morning, so what's it like there today?
Yeah, Diane, we're in Place de la République. It is an area that in the days after those horrible terrorist attacks became an area where people were leaving tributes and flowers and candles, and that has happened again this week. There's a really subdued atmosphere, and we just had a moment's silence because the commemoration for the victims at the Bataclan, remember that's that concert hall not far from here where 90 people were killed, and there was a siege between French police and the terrorists inside for several hours. So President Macron, the French president, has been at that ceremony. He's still there now. But as you can see, people are coming to this area here at Place de la République right through today. And there is, I think, you know, a real kind of, people are just pausing and remembering. I was here in the days after the terror attacks in Paris 10 years ago. And, you know, there is still that kind of sense of shock, I think, today that, you know, that scale of violence, senseless violence could be perpetrated against innocent people in cafes and bars. We had commemorations at the restaurants and cafes and bars just a short distance from here earlier over the last couple of hours, where, you know, people have been coming again, and the French president and other dignitaries have been holding those commemoration services because, you know, it was the deadliest terror attack in France's modern history. It is a day that changed Paris immeasurably, and, you know, I think the main message that we've been hearing again and again on the radio here in France, on the TV throughout this week, where, you know, we've seen and heard some very powerful stories of survivors and people who have really come together since, is that terrorism never wins. And that is a message which kind of is pervasive throughout all of the coverage of these very, very important events 10 years on. Diane?
Tom, French intelligence chiefs reportedly say the risk of another attack like this one has been greatly reduced, but that the threat today is more complex. Why?
Yeah, because if you look at the more recent terror attacks in France, you know, if you go back to 10 years and there were a spate of very, very deadly, fairly well-organized terror attacks. There was one down in Nice using a truck along the promenade, which I also covered back then, which was absolutely horrific. You know, back then, groups like Islamic State were involved in those terror attacks, inspiring them. The terror attacks more recently in France are way less deadly, they're way less organized, and they tend to be lone wolf attacks, i.e. they are individuals who have been radicalized in some way, who then carry out violent acts in a seemingly fairly random way without much organization or even any kind of people backing them behind. So it's a harder problem for the security services in some ways to contend with, but clearly there has been a huge amount of work, and that, you know, the France of today is not the France of 10 years ago, thankfully, and the threat of terrorism has been greatly, greatly reduced. Diane?
Tom Soufi Burridge in Paris, thank you.